use case, which is then the e-commerce or digital shopping behavior. So on the in-store shopping behavior, what we typically try to understand is we as P&G have certain methodologies and guidelines that we advise retailers on how to structure their stores, how to structure their shelves, how to lay out products, how to call out promotions. These are all the things that we would typically advise a retailer on. And then what we then do is we supplement this with real in-store consumer experiences. So we will give a consumer, something similar to Google Glass, let them wear the device, and then let them do their shop as natural as possible. And then we review the footage either live or post the shop, and we basically look at how the consumer has shopped, right? So the consumer will go down different aisles, will look at different signages in store, will pick out a product, will stand at the shelf and be very confused and try and find their product. So these are all different things that we look at objectively from the video, and then we then go into an interview with the consumer, and we start trying to understand you took very long on the shelf. Talk us through what happened. Why did you put the product back down? And through that we get some insights about the consumer. Right now, I don't think that process of interviewing the consumer will stop. But what we're trying to do is we're trying to supplement this with a lot more data and insights from the video itself. Right. So as a consumer, when I walk into a store, right, I look at the shelf for a certain amount of time, right, before I make a decision. How long have I looked at the shelf before I've made my purchase decision? These are the kinds of data points that we're trying to gather, from consumers, right? So what caught your eye first? So what was the heat map of where attention was kind of focused, at a particular point in time? And these are the kinds of things that we're trying to gather or trying to supplement this information for, so that it provides a lot more robust data that supports, the insights that we do. So when you interview a consumer and say, yes, it was hard to find, but when you have this, very data-driven, video-based analytics that says they actually took, 7 seconds to make their decision, right? But we know that consumers ideally want to make their decision within 3 seconds, right? And these are the kinds of insights. So we want to be able to track and measure these kinds of things. In addition to just recording a video, we want to be able to, overlay this with some data about the consumer behavior and path to purchase. So broad summary on the in-store executions. Any questions before I can go on to the e-commerce piece?
Hi there. I would like to ask, does it all need to be, well, your whole research is right now offline, and we're doing do-it-yourself webcam eye tracking platform, so we couldn't help you in the store, but would you consider giving the video of 1 or 2 participants that were in a physical store and giving it to 200 online panelists, and then creating a heat map and understanding how fast people notice certain elements and how long they were looking at them, etc. Also with some kind of purchase intent test, meaning click the product you would like to purchase and how fast they actually select the product.
Yeah, so I think that would be something that's, I don't think it's exactly the use case, but it is something that I do see potential benefit where you upload the images and you get people to quality test those images. What I will say is that we do have some of that technology already existing. So where we kind of feed in images of shelves, feed in images of displays or of leaflets, whatever, and the AI tools already give us some of that data. Yeah, it's really about that specific in-store experience, that live experience that we're trying to gather that data on. So a lot of the time we face a struggle in South Africa where we and I'll give you a very concrete example, right? So we talk about Pampers being a signpost brand for the diapers category, right? But we know this from global research, right? So we know this from research that's been done in Europe or research that's been done in in the US or something like that. But we want to start creating this kind of data from a South African perspective. So if I take that Pampers example, what you would potentially want to measure is when the consumer enters the diapers category, which product caught their eye first, right? Which color caught their eye first. Those are the kinds of data points that we would like to start overlaying into our data. I think the one is to review the footage and get the heat maps and get the where their vision is focused, because currently we don't even have like the little red dot that shows where the vision is actually focused on. But ideally we want to start adding these kinds of layers of data to those videos. I see there's another question from Stefano.
Hi, Mohammed. I don't know if you can hear me.
Yeah.
A question from outside is, how are you currently conducting it? Is it an in-house lab that you've set up yourself in terms of just like people working for P&G conducting all the research, or do you find different vendors and you outsource the service completely, even though you might still have some of that hardware and the Google Glasses and all that stuff in-house? And then the follow-on question to that is, are you looking to do the same in terms of whatever approach you've done currently, or are you looking to outsource the service completely?
I think it's there's so let me explain that to answer your first question. So we currently do it through an agency. So we'll provide the brief of this is the consumer profile that we want. This is the time of month that we want them to do shopping. So typically we try to be as unobtrusive as possible, in the sense that we will say recruit a consumer. So we have our demographic of the consumer. This is the demographic. This is the stores or the chain that we want the shopper to shop in. The agency will then source that consumer, and typically the guide is find a consumer that's doing their monthly shop or their main shopping trip for the month, right? Which is usually a month end type of shop. So the agency will handle everything from. So we give the brief, they will handle everything from the brief onwards. So they will then equip the consumer with the glasses, give them the brief of what they need to do, gather the videos, and then we kind of take a hybrid approach for the actual, qualitative part where we interview the consumer. There we will, depending on the level of detail and stuff. So sometimes what we find with some of the agencies, maybe the moderator that we like or that we prefer is not available, in which case then we will then moderate that ourselves. But we also then have elements, sometimes we do have agency moderators running that. So from our perspective, there's no limitation. If someone wants to come in with a proposal that's end to end, that meets every point in the way, that's something that we can talk. But I think the core focus here is about the technology having the ability to get this data, and whether that's in us or an agency that's analyzing this data, I think can be decided. Ideally, obviously, you want this as automated and as seamless as possible, so that the turnaround times and stuff like that, they are not, we're not sitting 2 months or anything like that. They're waiting for these videos. The second element, which currently also just takes a lot of time, is just on the PII kind of stuff. So just making sure we're blurring out people's faces and stuff like that in the videos. So making sure that those things are all aligned. Ideally, like we do have platforms that again allow us to do this, but it's then multiple edits of the same video and editing on one platform, then taking it to another platform, blurring out the faces, taking it back, editing again. So those kinds of processes, and I won't say it's a deal breaker for us, but if there is elements to that we can simplify, then those will also be helpful. Any other questions on the in-store activities?
Yeah. Yes, hello. I have a question. Would it be able to get a video sample that you analyze, the one that you talked about before the end of the challenge? Because we want to analyze it with our AI software and provide you with a sample of the heat map for the competition.
Yep. So I'll have to take this back with Mikhail offline, just to make sure that there's no compliance kind of things that around sharing these kinds of videos. So I will get back to you on that.
Okay, thank you.
If there's no other questions on the in-store activities, then maybe I can just talk the online aspect as well. Cool. So for online, I think it's like I understand there's potential limitations in using certain devices in terms of like the distance from the eye, and being able to accurately capture the consumers focus points. But ideally, if we can have one, like from a cost perspective, having one technology that addresses both in-store and online is probably ideal. But as a secondary use case, we want to do a similar kind of shop along with consumers on the digital channels, right? So when they're scrolling their phones and stuff like that, they just being able to identify again. So I know there are tools and stuff that can screen record and we can see all of those kinds of things, but having the ability to capture where the consumer is looking, which banners make sense. So often in online channels, the location of filters and stuff like that, they are things that we will discuss with, with retailers. And consumers have certain expectations, right? So you will likely see them, navigating to the left-hand side, or looking at the left-hand side for the filters, and being able to quantify and qualify how well are things doing, like on a retailer's platform. So whether that's the retailer's layout itself, or whether that's even certain executions, so like a advertising banner or promoted ad or whatever it may be, being able to capture what are the things that capture the consumer's attention, and being able to measure that, does that lead to purchase? How many click-throughs do they have to go through before they add to basket? All of these kinds of pieces of data, are things that we would like to supplement shop alongs with. Yeah. Cool. Any questions? Any thoughts on the use case?
Yeah, I have a question. This is Krishna from Foresight. My question is online shopping behavior. A lot of things are tracked in the I mean, yes, there is going to be interaction between the eye and the online shopping platform or the marketplace. However, a lot of information comes from the app itself in terms of what is exact journey of the consumer inside the app, which is far more insightful, I guess. So I'm assuming you're looking for both, and that's where perhaps the comparison between online and offline shopping stops. What do you think about it?
Yeah, no, I think you're right. There's a lot of value in reading through the app data. The one of the challenges there is that, at least in my experience, and maybe I haven't done enough research on app specific vendors and things like that, but from what I can see is that the data is not as accessible as you would like, right? So retailers are not willing to share a lot of this data with companies, and that's kind of where we struggle to get that online path to purchase. So the in-app path to purchase, how many click-throughs, how many how many dropped, at what point did they drop, at how many pages they had to click through before they dropped, all of these kinds of things, which are friction points as you create more steps. So consumers, like, ideally I would love to measure that, right? And if there's a recommendation that can answer that, because you're right, the core focus is understanding consumer behavior online, and if the data from the app can give us that, then yeah, I'm okay with that being a source of data, because you're right, it's probably more richer than the visual eye tracking. But I wouldn't completely discount the eye tracking from a execution standpoint, right? Because having the right images on on, the pack shots, having the right information on those pack shots. How many images do you have? Those are things that help the consumer make a purchase, right? So is there a video element to the online store? Is there, brand, brand imagery, etc., that helps the consumer navigate? These are things that I don't know, maybe we can capture that in the metadata of the app, but my guess is that those kinds of details are not being captured at that level of granularity.
I agree. Can I just ask a supplementary question on that?
Sure.
Please. So you're right. I mean, the marketplaces, they might or might not provide those kind of data, but that can be, there are tools which is typically used to check UX UI of apps. That would be useful to measure such data, and it is done. We have done it in the past. But my question also is that while you're doing UX UI, obviously the architecture of the website or the app in this case is equally important for the navigation than the product I'm looking for. So it is always ideal to give a list or that I mean, it's almost equivalent to sending a shop along to a small shop, large shop, bigger shop, and supermarket, for example, where we track the eye and understand the behavior. Similarly, different kinds of apps and the UX UI will also give different kinds of insights. So I'm assuming that you'll also give a list of marketplaces or shops, e-shops, where we need to do this kind of an activity along with the eye tracking is what I understood.
Correct.
Just confirm.
Correct. Question from Casper, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, kind of a bit along those lines. I have a similar question. We are also, mostly focusing on online data acquisition, and so that's where we are mostly interested in contributing potentially. So my question is, so you talked about eye tracking, and we also heard about like how important app data is, but are you also interested in actually the interaction between eye data and mouse data? So more like the eye, as you said, is kind of a measure of attention where I'm looking at, but then the actual execution of the purchase is then, of course, kind of, either by swipes or by touches or by the mouse, depending on what device you're using. And especially the interaction between those two modalities is quite important, right? Like, for instance, let's say an important metric could be the time from looking on a certain image or advertisement or product to clicking on it, right? Or so I need to measure both. And my question is, like, first question is, are you interested in basically these combinations of mouse and eye data, or are you purely interested in eye data, and how is that, how is that? And the second question, also more in the data analytics part, is how important for you is basically data aggregation? Because like that's sometimes where it gets tricky, at least, or it can get challenging, and I think like you need a good solution to actually not only have data, let's say eye tracking data on a website for one participant, and then being able to aggregate this across many subjects, because the devices will be different, the resolution will be different, and there will be differences. And in order to, I think, make actionable results, you need a way to aggregate this data. So is that part of this proposal here, or should it be part of the proposal, and how important is that? Thank you.
No, I think it's extremely important for having that ability to simplify the analysis process, right? I think that's the question, right? And I think, yeah, I've seen some solutions where they dump out a raw CSV convoluted file, and you kind of have to write a ton of code to just answer one question. I've also seen some where the execution is fairly well defined, right? So you define your parameters of what you're looking for, and then prior to the consumer doing the activity or shop along, and then it kind of measures that it measures for that use case or that context that you that you've defined, right? Ideally, you want to simplify that process as much as possible, because at the end of the day, the time needs to be spent on discussing the insights and identifying the solutions, rather than spending 3 weeks coding and manipulating data across different. So yes, I would say a very crucial part would be the simplification of that data coming from and I think the combination of lens plus mouse 100% would be beneficial. But I'm also not going to put that constraint to say that that's a must. I think even if we have just the ability to track the eye without the necessary click through and app data, that is still something that is better than what we have right now.
Sorry, can I have one last question, which is a bit unrelated? Just also seeing the amount of participants in this call, are you I'm not sure you're going to share this here, but are you looking just for one solution, or there's a potential for more than one proposal to go through, or to go to the next stage, or just wondering how that part is, if you can share that.
Yeah. So Mikael, maybe you can answer this. From my perspective, it's if there's two solutions, one meets the one for specific point, the second solution meets a very specific point. I'm okay to evaluate those solutions and then compare them against each other, but I don't know whether there's a limit to how many ultimately enter the program itself.
Yeah, like you said, Mom, there wouldn't necessarily be a limit on it. It's more on how they address the use case that you define.
Perfect. Okay, thank you.
Krishna?
I had a question. Yes. So do we need to provide both integrate online and offline findings together, because they come from different worlds? No, right?
Yeah, no. So that would be there'll be two separate.
Two different pieces of work.
Correct. Yeah. So the broad-based is shop along as the broad-based kind of business use case. But yeah, I fully understand the complexity, and I don't see a need to actually bring them together. If the same device was tracking the eyes both for online and offline, ideally that would be great, because then it just means we don't purchase two devices or multiple devices for each use case. But if that is a massive constraint, then yeah, those can be treated as two very separate use cases, at least on the hardware.
Although if I may add, now there are a lot of organizations where there are tools available where you can, for example, there's a consumer who sees or browses something online and then ends up buying offline. And if there is a customer ID that is provided at the back end, you can actually integrate both of this and look at the consumer journey, both on and offline. But that's strictly not shop along. That is more like buying behavior or something like that. But so that's the reason I asked. It's based on the objective that these things.
Yeah. So I think in an ideal world that would be amazing, but it's also probably a very convoluted way to get to the insight. I mean, it's probably very valuable to link consumers and stuff like that from online to offline. In my experience, again, it's not data that retailers are going to share with us, down to that kind of level. But yeah, I think if we can keep, if we need to keep the solution separate, then happy for that to be the case. And just in the interest of time, I just want to take the next two questions. So John, with you.
Hi, can you hear us?
Yeah.
Perfect. So Casper and John here from iMotions. First thing first, thank you for the invite, and for sure both eye tracking and in-store environments and online is possible. But we quickly wanted to touch upon and follow up on Casper's comment here about multimodality. I think that's important, not sticking to one methodology. So mouse clicks, eye tracking in combinations. But on top of that, are you interested in looking at emotion tracking as well to not only understand what is cueing visual attention, but also what is the reaction to that? Or is it, limited to eye tracking and what you can track from the computer itself?
Yeah, so I think you guys are just expanding my use case for me. So I think as I say, we're interested in the human insights, right? And all of these then become important. So yeah, like if there's a solution that addresses everything, like, you know, end to end, because again, we want to understand the consumer, we want to understand the pain points, we understand what is making them, you know, frustrated, and typically we get in this, you know, through the qualitative interview, right?
Yeah.
We can and you know, we're saying you're struggling here, like what did you like about the store, what didn't you like? And they'll say, oh yeah, we had a lot of out of stocks, I don't like the store, it smelled bad. You know, these are things that definitely, so emotion does play a role in that thing, which we currently qualifying via consumer interviews, which I think will still happen for a lot of the elements. But again, like, if there's a solution that addresses everything, that end-to-end thing, like, I'm not going to say no, like, to that kind of proposal.
Perfect. Makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah. And then question from Stefano.
Last question, and maybe this, I'm skipping ahead, so I'm not sure if you're going to cover it, but just in terms of typical briefs and proposals that go out, will there be limitations in terms of working with international partners, in terms of broad-based Black economic empowerment regulations, or is that not something that's going to be of concern because it's going to probably go through a different office in terms of where it's coming through into South Africa?
Mikael, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, at least for this program, that's not a concern at the moment. It's yes, it's part of P&G's broader procurement strategy, but it's not a limiting factor. It's
Cool. So in the interest of time, Mikael, I'm not sure if there's any more questions. Maybe we can set up a secondary session like 2 weeks or 3 weeks down the line. I do need to drop off now. But yeah, I think like happy to
one
then have.
last question, if you can, please. The sample size, did you mention the sample size, or we have to provide the sample size?
You mean for the research itself? So this is not a once-off type of research. So it's something that we would want to do repeatedly, right? So we recruit, excuse me, we recruit consumers. Maybe let's just say every 6 months or whatever, a group of consumers across a certain criteria of retailers. And then we want to have this ability to get this kind of data from each of those interactions with these consumers. So sample size then doesn't become, it's kind of that ad hoc as you recruit consumers. You want to understand that specific shop along.
great. Thanks for the time, Mohammed, and Prithvi. I hand over to you to close up. This session was recorded, and the recording will be shared shortly. The Incubate Hub team will be sharing that.
Thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.